Welcome to class, everyone. I'm your host, and in today's explainer, we're going to dive into a discovery that completely shatters, well, pretty much everything we thought we knew about the origins of human civilization. You see, if you crack open an old textbook, it'll tell you that human beings first settled down, learned to farm, built cities, and then, and only when they had the free time and the resources, did they invent complex religion and temples. But what if those textbooks have it entirely backwards?
So, let's just do a quick mental exercise here. Normally, before you can build a massive religious monument, you'd absolutely need a settled farming society to support the builders, right? I mean, you need domesticated pack animals to move the stones, metal tools to actually carve them, and agriculture to feed the hundreds of workers it takes to get the job done. But what happens when archaeologists unearth a sprawling, sophisticated, megalithic temple built thousands of years before the invention of the wheel, before metal tools, and literally before the very first seed was ever planted for farming?
Well, here is our syllabus for today's explainer. We're going to cover a monumental archaeological mistake, unearthing a prehistoric wonder, clues in the bones, geometry before the wheel, symbols of a death cult, and finally, rewriting human history.
All right, Section 1, a monumental archaeological mistake. We're starting with a cautionary tale for all you aspiring archaeologists out there about how easily historic truths can just be completely overlooked. Back in the 1960s, some top researchers from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University saw some broken limestone on a gently sloping Turkish hill, and they just quickly dismissed it as an abandoned medieval cemetery. Nothing to see here, right? But then, in 1994, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt reviewed their survey and decided to visit the site himself, known in Turkish as Göbekli Tepe, or Belly Hill. Imagine being in his shoes for a second, experiencing that pure emotional thrill of discovery. From the moment he saw that rounded, rocky ground, he realized this was a stonecutter's absolute dream. Those weren't medieval gravestones, they were the tops of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, shaped by human hands. He knew instantly he was standing on top of a gigantic Stone Age masterpiece.
Moving right along to Section 2, unearthing a prehistoric wonder. Grab your virtual trowels, class, because the scale of what Schmidt uncovered is just staggering.
Picture this landscape about 11,500 years ago. Today, it's a nearly featureless brown expanse after centuries of intensive farming, but back then, it was a lush, vibrant paradise right in the Fertile Crescent. This environment was teeming with huge herds of wild gazelles, rivers totally filled with migrating geese, and rippling fields of wild wheat like inkhorn and emmer. It provided incredibly abundant resources, which naturally drew in nomadic hunter-gatherers from all across the Levant and Africa. Today, about 50 local laborers help preserve this site, but imagine a typical workday 11,500 years ago. You've got early stonecutters baking in the heat, chipping away at softer limestone outcrops for weeks on end, using only primitive flint tools to shape these monoliths right there on the spot. Here's a quick class challenge for you. If a cubic foot of limestone weighs roughly 160 pounds, just try to calculate the sheer human force required to haul a 16-foot, 10-ton pillar up a steep hill without wheels or pack animals. I mean, it's a monumental feat.
And to truly grasp how impossible this seems without metal tools or wheels, let's put it into perspective. Göbekli Tepe is at least 11,000 to 12,000 years old. That means it predates the stone rings of Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids of Giza by at least 6,500 years. There is literally more time between the builders of Göbekli Tepe and the invention of Sumerian clay tablets than there is between Sumer and us today.
Which brings us to Section 3, clues in the bones. So who actually built this prehistoric wonder if there were zero permanent houses, no cooking hearths, and no farming tools initially found at the summit?
I want you all to put on your archaeozoologist hats for a second. If we were to sit down for a fictional interview with lead archaeozoologist Joris Peters, he'd tell you he examined over 100,000 bone fragments from this site. And the breakdown is honestly pretty mind-blowing. 60% of the bones are wild gazelle. The rest are wild boar, red deer, vultures, ducks. All of them have cut marks and splintered edges showing clear butchery patterns. But what is the absolutely crucial point here? 0%. Not one single bone comes from a domesticated animal. So what does that tell us about these builders?
Exactly. They were strictly hunter-gatherers. There was absolutely no farming. This was a logistical nightmare requiring hundreds of hunter-gatherers to somehow feed, house, and coordinate. Think about it. A typical nomadic band back then was maybe 150 people.
To carve and move 7-ton pillars, multiple different bands of hunter-gatherers had to collaborate. This means this massive construction project actually forced early humans into complex social cooperation and shared norms way before they ever planted a seed or fenced in a cow.
All right, Section 4, Geometry before the wheel. Because these early humans weren't just randomly piling rocks together over thousands of years, they were actually using advanced math.
Time for a quick classroom activity. I want you to trace the points on these 3 main enclosures in your mind's eye. Researchers Gilha Clay and Professor Avi Gopher ran a computer algorithm using standard deviation mapping on the site, and they discovered that the center points of the 3 main 20-meter-wide stone circles form a perfect equilateral triangle. No way, right? This proves they didn't just build these haphazardly over time. The 3 structures were initially planned as a single unified project from the jump. And this brilliantly illustrates that these hunter-gatherer specialists possessed a unified, knowledge-based, top-down master plan of geometric design. We always used to think geometry and floor plans only emerged around 10,500 years ago, after humans became farmers. But the mathematical spatial hierarchies here lay the groundwork for the eventual transition from circular rooms to the rectangular buildings used by later farming cultures. Section 5. Symbols of a death cult. But why? Why go through the immense mathematical and physical agony to build this thing? Why carve limestone until your hands bleed if you're a nomadic hunter-gatherer who mainly needs to worry about finding your next meal?
Look closely at the iconography carved into these pillars, creating what Klaus Schmidt called a Stone Age zoo. Notice how they almost entirely feature dangerous predators and nasty beasts? We're talking venomous scorpions, crawling spiders, snakes, fierce lions. On Pillar 43, there are these large vultures and abstract symbols. They're carving the menacing menagerie of their world, rather than the typical edible prey, like those gazelles, that actually made up their daily diet.
So why the dangerous animals? Well, Stanford archaeologist Ian Hodder muses that it's a scary, fantastic world of nasty-looking beasts. He believes these medicine carvings reflect early humans trying to spiritually master their deepest fears. These fierce predators were likely stylized as guardians to the spirit world, existing in a universe totally beyond the physical one. And it gets even deeper. French researcher Daniel Stordour points out that in ancient cultures of this era, vultures were often believed to transport the flesh of the dead straight up to the heavens. Because of this, Klaus Schmidt theorized this entire site was an early center of ritual, a massive prehistoric death cult. Deep test pits show the floors are made of hardened limestone, and Schmidt bet that beneath them lies a final resting place. Placed high on a hill with this ideal panoramic view of the lush valleys below, the dead were quite literally looking out over a hunter's dream. Okay, our final section, Section 6, Rewriting Human History. The absolute crucial point of today's class is understanding how this one single hill in Turkey flips our textbook models completely upside down. Compare the 2 leading theories. The old model told us that agriculture allowed permanent settlement, which eventually freed up the time to invent religion and build temples. But the Göbekli Tepe model sparks massive debate because it suggests the exact opposite. The irresistible human desire to build a massive, complex temple forced hundreds of people to gather. That gathering accelerated the need for permanent settlements, eventually forcing the invention of agriculture just to feed the religious workers.
As Ian Hodder perfectly summarizes it, this shows sociocultural changes come first, agriculture comes later. The organized spiritual drive of human beings was the true catalyst for complex society. The sheer caloric demand of chanting, drumming, and feasting at this Neolithic Disneyland pushed our ancestors to finally tame that wild wheat that was growing just 20 miles down the road. Basically, religion birthed the farm.
All right, class dismissed, but I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. Today, archaeologists estimate that the 1-acre excavation we've discussed covers less than 5% of the total site at Göbekli Tepe. Ground-penetrating radar shows at least 16 other megalith rings are still buried out there in the dirt. If just this one 11,500-year-old stone circle can completely rewrite the origins of human civilization, what other fundamental truths about humanity are still hiding beneath the earth, waiting to be unburied? Keep digging, and I'll see you in the next explainer.